Yes, sir, we can start. So, firstly, I would like to thank all our guests for joining, starting from Mr. A.S. Paneerselvam and the Honorable MP and former Civil Servant and Secretary to the Ministry of Culture, Jawahar Sirkar. And I also like to thank Garga Chatterjee, Professor at ISI, for joining. So, right now, I would invite Pugal to introduce the topic, my fellow TPF coordinator.
Thank you, Dharani. Thank you, panelists. Welcome to the panel discussion of Dravidian Professionals Forum. Today's topic is India, a union of cooperative federalism. Federalism traditionally signifies the independence of the union and state governments of a country in their own spheres. Different nation states follow different types of federalism. While the US follows a strict separation of powers between the federal and state governments, European Union, another example where nation states join together without ceding or compromising on their sovereignty to form a kind of supranational structure or a confederation of nations. Whereas India follows a quasi-federal structure with powers divided between the union and the states, and some as common ground for the union or the states to legislate, with union having predominance over the state decisions. While Keshavananda Bharati case holds federal nature as basic structure of the constitution, nowhere the term federation is used. Little was known or elaborated as to what type of federalism Indian constitution has adopted. In successive judgments, while interpreting the constitution, the Supreme Court has held, for example, in state of Rajasthan versus Union of India, that the constitution was amphibian in the sense that it could travel either on a federal or on a unitary plane. While in state of Karnataka versus Union of India, the Supreme Court said that Indian constitution, strictly speaking, is not in a federal sense because it is not possible to suggest that separate autonomous sovereign states have joined to form a country as in the United States of America. It is for this reason that it was often defined as quasi-federal. Further, Indian Constitutional Assembly is the first constituent body in the world to embrace what H. Birch and others have referred to as cooperative federalism, which is essentially defined as administrative cooperation between the union and the states, with dependence of the states for some level of financial matters from the union. The framers of the Indian Constitution carefully made it a point that India should have a federal character with more autonomy for the states. They realized India, that is Bharat, is not a single unit. It was not a single nation state. 562 princely states with a defined sovereignty surrendered their sovereignty for a common cause and joined the Indian Union with an expectation that their autonomy, culture, and identity will be respected. Later, the states were reorganized on linguistic basis to create the present-day states with independent legislatures, as framers of the constitution and the policymakers rightfully considered language as the major way for cultural identity. Thus, more independence, more autonomy, and more respect for culture and identity is necessary in the form of federal structure to protect and safeguard unitary nature of any country. However, the recent trend, particularly after the present union government assumed the power, is a cause of concern for the cooperative federal nature of the union. Policies like one nation, one tax, one nation, one language, one nation, one ration, and even policies like common entrance test for medical courses, that is NEET, National Eligibility and Entrance Test, wherein concurrent list provisions are used, or rather we can say misused by the union government to mandate a uniform entrance test on a state subject. That is, for example, health is a state subject. But in the case of NEET, health was brought under the category of education, which is a concurrent list subject, and thereby the union usurping the jurisdiction of states to legislate and frame policies. Handling of COVID emergency is another case in point. Disaster Management Act was invoked to frame guidelines of lockdown even in remote villages and rural areas in states without even consulting the states. To elaborate more on this subject, we have illustrious list of panelists, Mr. Jawahar Sirkar, Honorable Member of Parliament representing Trinamool Congress Party, Thiru A.S. Paneerselvam, veteran journalist and former Reader's Editor of The Hindu, Professor Garga Chatterjee, Indian Statistical Institute and founder of Bangla Poco. Each panelist may speak for 15 to 20 minutes, followed by a Q&A moderated by my fellow coordinator, Dharani. First, I would like to invite Honorable Member of Parliament, Mr. Jawahar Sirkar, to make his remarks. Sir, the floor is yours. Sir, you are on mute.
Okay. Am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gandhi and Mr. Dharanidharan, my colleagues on the panel, Mr. Paneerselvam and Garga Chatterjee, for inviting me to join all of you. You see, Mr. Gandhi, you have touched the chord of what India stands for. Federalism is a political structure that has been imposed on a civilization. We have to understand the components of Indian civilization are different ethnicities, different languages, different customs, different sentiments. And these have varied according to the topography, the situation of the province or the state, the region, and these have always been heterogeneous. In fact, the binding religion, the Indic religions, as we can call them, have a deep amount of federalism within them. At each level of culture, even if you look at religious culture, when you look at the diya, the lamp that we light ceremonially in temples and other occasions, there are more than one wicks going around, a series of wicks, so that everybody gets to participate. The idea is that everybody needs to participate in this union. This was felt by the Indian civilization and those who have led it, and that heterogeneity is the essence of India. Beginning with that, we had various conquests, various amounts of subjugation, various stratifications. Having said that, the one that we inherited from an imperial power is the one that you just talked about of 17 provinces and 562 states. True, they were not fully autonomous. True, it is true. But at the same time, the founders of Indian Constitution realized that each one of them have a distinct character. And this distinct character cannot simply be mowed down, road rollered. You cannot road roller these cultural differences, and that these need to be respected. The Constitution was provided for two alternate scenarios. One was India was passing through a grave crisis. Its northern borders had been attacked. There were troubles and dissensions within India. So one was to take care of what you call defense and internal security, which called for a degree of centralization. And the other was to provide for decentralized, heterogeneous civilization. Now, it is amphibian in every sense of the term. It depends on the polity that is governing it. It depends on the political power that governs it. We come straight to the point. For the last 7-8 years, we have noticed an increasing tendency to centralize. Now, I have had about half my senior career in the central government and half my senior career in the state government. And I think I know the mentality of both of them. There is a homogenizing force within the central government, no doubt about it. They get annoyed at differences of regions and differences of approach. But never have I seen, and I've started working from the days of Mrs. Indira Gandhi, never have I seen such a blatant attempt to completely use every occasion to introduce a certain amount of stratification, straitjacketism. We can start. The first major assault on India in the recent past has been demonetization. And demonetization has shattered our informal economy beyond repair. Most states have not been able to recover from demonetization that was imposed in 2016. That is the time when I quit the central government to voice my own opinions in private and public. Demonetization is one of the what shall I say? It's a hit and run. It's a war technique put upon the people of India just because they wanted to win the UP elections and show the voters that they were anti-rich. That's all. These 17 lakh crores of rupees that were in circulation, that were demonetized, all of it came back. All of it came back, and therefore there was no capture of black money that was asked for. Followed after this, consequently, at every level, when we see the Citizenship Act, the Citizenship Act was also done without consultation and imposed on the rest of India. There are different opinions on what citizenship could constitute, depends on one's own cultural history, political history. Now, CAA was also steamrolled. We see GST coming in a dramatic flourish on the 1st of July, at midnight, copying Pandit Nehru's tryst with destiny speech, the gentleman goes in for a dramatic announcement of demonetization of GST that was completely half-baked. As an officer who has served both governments for well over 4 decades, I can tell you with certainty that your guess that the GST was half-baked is completely true. I know from my colleagues who were functioning then that none of them were mentally prepared. I was tax commissioner when we moved from VAT towards GST. Now, as a concept, it is not harmful. At a concept, it is perfectly all right. But look what is happening to GST. I'll give you 2 or 3 examples, and I'll digress for a minute on GST. Between 2016-17 and 2020-21, the 5 years that we have had it, the transfer of monies to the state have fallen per year was 35.44 lakh crores, 35.44 lakh crores in 2016-17 when it was introduced. And states last year have got 29.99, 30 lakh crores, 5 lakh crores less. The center's share shot up from 64.5 lakh crores to 70 lakh crores. You can well understand which way the trend is going. Now they are saying that next year they will stop the state support that was given in case of deficit collection. That will be disastrous for all states, and every state needs to wake up to this problem. If you look at the net transfers to the state, you cut the flab and come straight to the point. If you look at net transfers from to the center, net transfers of the entire GST collection, how much did the center get in the first year? It got 11%. How much is the center got last year? It's got 15.5%. So obviously there is a skewed arithmetic that needs to be revised. And that point needs to be agitated by the state, because unless you get economic autonomy, unless you get economic freedom, look at the delayed transfer to the state. Even the transfers that are due get delayed. I move on from GST to the encroachment on states. Article 370 was brought in, and we will not get into the politics of Article 370 and Kashmir, but following the model that you can take a vibrant state and cut it into 3 parts, they are not talking of cutting up Bengal into 3 parts, 2 to 3 parts. I have read an article where they are talking of making 4 Nadus out of Tamil Nadu. 4 Nadus out of Tamil Nadu. Whatever they find difficult, they try to separate and cut and slice, so that at least a few units can be captured. A few. Now, this is completely antithetical to the spirit of federalism. Incidentally, talking of 370, the Supreme Court at long last has ruled out that the internet stoppage was completely illegal. Now, what do you do after the illegal act has been committed? If you look at the delayed 15th Finance Commission, you can look at the attempt to delimit the constituencies in the state. This delimitation, as you know, would mean that if you go by population, what the center is thinking, the number of parliamentarians from the south, where family planning has been better practiced, where population control has been better, the number will actually come down. They'll be punished with lesser representatives. And those Bimaru states of North India that have not been able to control their population would be rewarded with extra numbers. These games of playing around with constituencies, I've just mentioned delimitation, these are very, very dangerous. These cut at the very heart of democracy. Finally, the way COVID was handled. COVID was both remember all my life. So the way COVID was handled was complete centralization to begin with, which was foolish. We have done relief work of all types, emergency relief work of all types, national emergencies, all types. The first thing is things are decentralized. You don't decide which village and which taluka of Tamil Nadu or Bengal will undergo lockdown. You don't decide centrally sitting there. Now, these were there, and right from the beginning, all procurement was centralized. PPE, protective equipment, basic testing facilities, every certification has to be central. And what was the center doing? It was sending teams only mainly to opposition ruled states to gain publicity that this state is actually fudging figures. This state, I mean, being in public service, you know how difficult it is to fudge, because records are there kept at multiple places, digitally and otherwise. So nobody can really go and fudge up. So it became a war of attrition. Bengal had about 9 or 10 teams. Tamil Nadu had teams. Anyone who was in the opposition had teams of central officers coming and telling them what is wrong with them. This is fascism. This is not cooperative federalism. This is not the way to function. So at every level, the last of all was the flip-flop on vaccines. As you remember, vaccine was first centralized. Then again, you said the states have to fend for themselves and buy it at exorbitant cost. Then it was re-centralized. And now it is given on its own basis. And almost every state is running short. Migrant laborers, I can go on and on, but I will stop here by saying that all the recent incidents and all the recent tackling by the Modi government indicates a mentality, and that is more dangerous than the actions actually. The mentality of superiority of the center over states. That is inimical to Indian federalism and extremely dangerous. It is extremely dangerous. I'll end by a small good note. The latest news that we have got, declared by the central government's Niti Aayog, is that during the lockdown year last year, the Indian GDP suffered a net loss of 7.7%. It's the sharpest fall in our history, 7.7%. But when you segregate the state GDPs, 2 states did magnificently. One is Tamil Nadu, with a 2% plus growth, and Bengal with a 1.2% plus growth. These are the only 2 major states among the big economies. Big economies are 10 lakh crore plus GDP states are called big economies. We have only 7 states that are so-called big economies, and Tamil Nadu and Bengal are both there. These are the only 2 states that did not buckle under the trend of the All India fall and actually did positive GDP, but state GDP rise. Now, whether this has something to do with the feeling of continuous feeling, the strong feeling of autonomy or not, is for others to take a view. With these words, I take your leave. Thank you.